Welcome to the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, storyteller, and lifelong helper. For more than a decade, I've been amplifying the voices of modern day heroes, people who are solving real problems with heart and courage and service. As we launch season 10 and celebrate today's 100th episode, we continue our mission of helping the helpers and reminding the world that meaningful change happens one small act of kindness at a time. Did you know that there are over 400,000 children currently in the foster care system in the United States? Today's guest is no stranger to that fact. I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Dave Anderson, the founder of Safe Families for Children. I can't wait to share his incredible journey and our inspiring conversation and everything that Dave is doing to make an enormous difference in our world and for tens of thousands of children and families. You're not going to want to miss it. I'm so excited to have Dave Anderson here today from Safe Families for Children. Welcome, Dave. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks so much, Heidi. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
It's really exciting to have this conversation. And when I learned a little bit about what you are doing for children, I was incredibly touched, incredibly inspired. And it's a really unique and a different approach, having spoken to a lot of organizations in similar fields, but you take a lot of things and combine them. So why don't we just jump in, and why don't you share with our audience what it is that Safe Families for Children does?
Yeah. Well, I'm a psychologist, and I started Safe Families really to prevent what I was seeing in foster care. I also run a child welfare agency. And what we do is we mobilize communities and engage volunteers to do really a couple different things. One is to host children in their home for however long a parent needs in order to keep them safe and eventually be able to go back to their parent and to come alongside and mentor parents and help them get back on their feet. So our goal is to really prevent child abuse, prevent the need to go into foster care, and ultimately to keep families together. Because our belief is, in nearly all situations, the family is the best place for that child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just curious, you said you're a psychologist, and I always say this, but never ever do we, at least never ever have I met anyone in my hundreds of interviews, thousands of interviews of nonprofit founders who said, when I grow up, I want to be a nonprofit founder. There's a lot of things that happen on our journey that lead us to this work. And so I'm just curious, kind of when you were young, what did you have mentors? Did you have people that influenced you? Did you grow up in a philanthropic family? Or what do you think were early indicators that you might be led to this work?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I come from a blue collar family. My dad was a bricklayer, so my goal in life was to be a bricklayer. And but when I was working for him, working for him helped me, pay for school and college and stuff like that. And I was what they call a laborer. I would, kind of mix mortar and lay brick and um, And I noticed my dad would always bring on new bricklayers without really any warning. And as a kind of a shy, quiet guy, I would talk to these guys that were hired by my dad, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm Dave. Where are you from?" And they would say, "Oh, I'm from Joliet, Illinois." I'm like, "Oh, what part of Joliet?" "Well, Joliet prison." And then another guy would be, "Oh, I'm from this, I just got out of this prison, and I just got out of this prison," and one time I was sitting on a bucket. My dad and I were having lunch together, and I don't know, maybe 16. I said, "Hey, Dad, I think you need to do a better job of vetting your people, and because all these people you're hired are prisoners. They all just got out of prison." And he said, "Oh, I know that." And I'm like, "Well, why in the world would you do that?" And he said, If I don't help them, who will? And it was
Mm,
really those words that, kind of got me thinking about not just entrepreneurialism, but more about our role and responsibility in society. And this idea
amen.
that if I don't help, who will? And you know what was interesting? My dad never had any of them steal from him or treat him. In fact, when he got into an argument on a job with, the electricians who are the highest level of trades,
Right.
these guys would stand behind my dad with shovels and whatever and say, Cliff, just let us know and we'll pop them. They also had a gun, right? Well, just let us know and we'll pop them. My dad was like, what in the world? Stop. No. And eventually I pulled him one of them
I love it.
aside and I said, why in the world would you do that? You just got out of prison. Why would you risk it? And he said, no one else would give us a chance. And your
Mm,
dad did. And I
right.
would do anything to
Oh,
support him. So that was
right.
really the initial, for me, the initial model around
Right.
the role, the responsibility to give back. And there are people in our society who have no one on their side. And I think we as a society have a responsibility to do that.
Amen. Well, speaking of mentors, I mean, you talked about that you mentor parents, but what a beautiful mentoring moment that is. And your dad not only mentoring those those men coming out of jail, but just all of those seeds of goodness that he planted in so many people by
Mm.
giving them an opportunity, which is really what I hope these conversations do is plant seeds in people to inspire them to serve. So you go on, you're a bricklayer and you go to school, you're a doctor, so you obviously become a psychologist. And what happens? I mean, you don't just say, "Hey, one day I'm going to start this nonprofit that's going to help all these children." Talk to me about the moments that led up to this and
Yeah.
what it was. I read a little bit and I saw the video and did my homework, but I love hearing the story. This is always, and
Yeah.
almost everyone I've interviewed can say the moment, um, knows the moment they were called to do this.
Yeah.
Almost everyone.
It's interesting. I actually wanted to be a bricklayer. I didn't want to be a psychologist. And my dad said, "Well, whatever you do, don't be a bricklayer." So then it's like, well, what the heck else can I do? Um, and I used to work I drove a city bus, and people from the university would get on my bus and just sit there and talk to me for hours and hours and hours, and I would listen to them. So eventually someone said, well, people like to talk to you. Why don't you become a psychologist? I'm like, what? And so I ended up doing that, and I got into the world of foster care and child abuse. And my job was I worked at a large medical center. My job was to assess children who have been horribly abused by their parents and
Mm.
determine what's the psychological impact of their child abuse and to find out who did it and put them in jail. And I was
That's a
also,
very hard job.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
that when I think about psychologist, I think about the sponge because all the pain is filtering through you.
Mm.
There's a lot that happens with that intake of all that
Oh
pain.
yeah. Yeah. So I ended up I was also running a child welfare agency. And so I knew foster care and I knew the kind of the impact of child abuse. But at Mount Sinai I met this girl and my job was to assess her. And she happened to be the same age as my daughter at the time. She was 5 and her arm was broken, her retina was
Mm,
detached, and her brain was swelling. And my job was to find out what happened and to assess what's the impact of what she just experienced. And so she
right.
was reluctant. I get it. No, she was 7. She was reluctant to tell me. So eventually I talked to her mom and I said, I'm trying to understand what happened to your daughter so we could figure out what to do next. And she said, I grew up in foster care. And most people don't know when I turned 18, my foster parents didn't want anything to do with me anymore. And my bio parents, their rights were terminated early on. So I turned 18 and there was really no one helping me out. And so I got pregnant and, I tried to work. I had to keep working. But my daughter got sick and if I were to miss one more day of work, I would lose my job. So I asked my ex-boyfriend to take care of her when I went to work. I didn't realize he went back to drugs and he did this to her while I was at work.
Mm.
And she ultimately lost custody of her child because of me.
Oh,
And I
wow.
started to think about, um, when she basically said, and I just had no one to call. And I couldn't imagine in a crisis
Right.
situation not
Right.
having anyone to call. And I began to look at, that's why a lot of kids go into foster care is their parent has no one to call. And
Right.
if they had, extended family or a support system or something like, they could tolerate most difficult situations. But if you have no one to call when things go wrong, then worse things are going to go wrong. So I started
Right.
to think about, what if we could have had a network of people that this woman could call and someone could step up and say, "Oh, you need someone watch your kid today? I'll take them in." We could make a huge difference in preventing um, kids from going into foster care or from being abused because people don't realize the long-term impact of child abuse is really horrible. So that's kind of what led to me
Wow.
moving forward.
Well, I mean, connecting those dots, I don't think, I mean, I've interviewed a number of foster care nonprofits that do beautiful work. And I've seen and learned a lot of the stories of the child leaving with the trash bag and turning 18 and having nothing. But for you to connect the dots and all those things and to bring all of them together to create a program, uh, an organization that literally makes sure that there's a place for these children and that the parents then have a mentor or someone to show them what it's like. Not only are they caretaking, but that mentorship is everything because these foster kids at 18 that are leaving with the trash bag, no one told them how to be a parent. They didn't
Right,
have a mentor. They
right.
didn't have that role model. And so it's you're taking it so many steps farther than everyone puts it in a little silo. Oh, I'm going to do foster care. Oh, I'm going to do child abuse. Nobody that I have run across has combined everything and said, let's go to the core root problem here and see if we can intervene at the root, which is
Yeah.
brilliant, right? It's
Well,
so
I don't know if
it's
it's brilliant, but
it is.
as
It
a
is.
bricklayer, as an ex-bricklayer, that's kind of what I thought about. And the interesting thing is I never intended to start a nonprofit or a move. And people call Safe Families a movement, or I've been awarded a national social entrepreneur and a national social movement leader. But that was never my intent. And
It never is, by the way.
yeah, I know, isn't that the case? But what was interesting, I thought, okay, well, one of the root problems is social isolation. People that often lose their kids have no one else to call. And it's,
Right.
it's wrong, right? Because I have 10 people to call,
Right.
and if I'm in trouble, I have probably a dozen people that would leave work and take my kids and say, I'll keep them as long as you want. You don't have to
Right.
pay me. You don't have to be whatever.
Right.
I care about you. I'll take my kids for however long you want. And so I had this idea. I'm like, what if we mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to do this? But then the issue is it had to start somewhere. Um, it had to start somewhere. And so I was also running a nonprofit organization called Lydia. And this is funny, it's right at the same time this was happening. This mom came to Lydia and knocked on my door and said, "I'm in trouble. I need someone to take my kids." And I said, I'm sorry, we can't take them unless you abuse them. And
Oh
so
God.
if it gets like that, then come back and we'll be glad to help you. And then and then I thought, what in the world did I just say?
Right,
But
right.
she grabbed my arm and she said, I I need someone to take my kids and I want you to do it. I need you to take my kids until I can get back on my
Wow.
feet. And I'm like, what? And I said, and she's like, yeah, I need you. And I said, okay, my wife and I will take your kids. She's a stranger to me,
Wow.
right? I only met her
Wow.
like a half hour before. And
Wow.
I said, well, let me call my wife. And hey, I called my wife. Hey, do you mind? I bring
Hey,
two kids
honey.
home, and they're like, who are these kids? I don't really know who they are, but
Wow.
I think we need to help her out. And it's a mom who I think she had to go to substance abuse or something. And so we took her in, we took her kids in, and stayed involved with her. And she was actually quite emotional. She said, you know, there's no one in my life willing to help me out. And
Wow.
it's just shocking that a stranger who doesn't even know me is willing to help me out. So
Wow.
she
Beautiful.
she completed what she needed, eventually got her kids back, and actually called me, I think, a couple weeks ago. This was 20 years. And her kids, ended up going to college and she ended up getting on her feet
Oh.
and doing things like that. And that was the first. And so then I don't know how it happened. More moms would end up calling and I would
Word got out that
yeah, right. And I would call my
Dave is.
sister and my brother. I was like, "Can you do this?" And then I was pastoring a church, and I would come into church with kids, and anyone could take them home. And then I realized we should vet people, right? We need to vet people.
So
We
what year
first
is all this happening, Dave?
this
When
was
is
about
this?
203, 202,
Okay.
203.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I said, well, we should probably vet people. We should probably call it something, you know, and I'm like, I don't know what to call it. And this mom, no, the second mom said, hey, I don't, you're a stranger. I just have one question. I'm like, are you a safe family? And so
Oh,
that's kind of how I came up with the name.
wow.
Are you a safe, that it says, if you're in
Right.
trouble and you need someone to step up and help you out, your biggest question is, are you safe?
Right. Are you safe?
So that's kind of the
Wow.
beginning. But then
And
after that, it wasn't easy, but it was the
well,
beginning
and
of it.
so that's a perfect segue because talk to me. I mean, we start almost everyone I've talked to, it starts with one person and one child. You think if I can just help this one child, if I can just help this one person, and then before you know it, it's on its own, it's going, it's growing, and you're starting a business. You're starting a business. So talk to me about those early challenges. I mean, you
Well,
have
I
your
think,
own kids and and are you still working for the other nonprofit? When did you decide to do this full time? I mean, talk to me about the challenges of building this out because, you have scaled. I know it's been over 20 years, but you have scaled significantly. So let's talk about like those
yeah.
challenges.
Well, one is I didn't know how to scale. I never actually even have a desire. I didn't have a desire to scale, but I knew there was a couple problems. One is, how do I convince people to do this? Because
Right.
everyone's busy, their lives are busy, they're concerned about their own kids, whatever. And when I'm trying, and if it's true, if we're trying to build a safety net and mobilize communities, that means everybody has a role to play. And what we were
Right.
looking for is host families, right? Who could take, more of the most critical times, right? Who could take kids and when a parent is at their wits' end and has no one and they need to go take care of themselves. And so
Right.
that's, how do we find host families? Then it's like, how do we find others who are willing to just befriend a mom or dad and say, I'm a listening ear, or I could help you find work. I know someone who's looking, or, You need a ride to get to the doctor or whatever it is. And then I needed someone who had things because all these moms needed something. They needed a
Right.
mattress, they needed
Right.
dishes, they needed whatever. So those were my three things. I'm like, okay, I need to find people willing to give me those three things. And so it started, it's interesting. My biggest issue is recruiting people not based on need, but based on shared values. How do I find people that have similar values that I do? That maybe
Right.
someone came alongside their parents when they were younger, or maybe someone stepped out and gave them a helping hand, or maybe someone did and they want to give back. So how do I find
Right.
those people? And then how do I unleash them and connect them with parents
Right.
that are in difficult situations. It wasn't as easy. I
No,
thought
this
it'd
is
be
not
easy.
easy at
It's not
all.
easy. But the shock
No.
was we got going and we started to get some traction and I thought everybody would love it. Who wouldn't love it, right? You're creating a safety net. You're not paying
Right.
anybody. Everybody's doing it
Right.
for free, whatever. I thought everybody would loved it. And then I got a letter in the mail from the Attorney General's office. Never got
Uh-uh.
anything from an Attorney General ever. I didn't even like getting tickets. And they said, we hear you're doing something called Safe Families. We want to let you know that it's illegal and you need to immediately stop or we'll have to put you in jail. I'm like, what?
What?
What in the world? And I'm like,
What?
I'm like, what are they talking about? It's illegal. It's helping someone. Why,
Right.
why is
Right.
helping someone illegal? And so,
Wow.
and then I got another one from the Attorney General in Wisconsin, and they called me in because we started to grow into Wisconsin, and they called me into a meeting and said, what you're doing is illegal. A group of lawyers from the state. And I said, well, what's illegal about it? Oh, well, first of all, I said, "How-" no, I said, what's illegal about it? And they're like that helping thing, putting kids in homes and taking care of them. That's illegal. And I'm like, well, we vet people just like you do foster care. Why is it illegal? I
Right.
said, well, if you help them, they won't come to our attention. And we believe the state is best equipped to
Oh,
help people. Then I was a
interesting.
little irritated, and I shouldn't have
A
said this.
little.
I shouldn't
Wow.
have said this. I said, how illegal is it? Do I just get a ticket and pay a ticket, or what do we
Right.
do if I just keep going? And they said, well, we'd have to put you in jail, and in order to stop you because you're doing things that you're not allowed to do. So that was just really a shock to me. It was like, are you, and
Th-
I,
That's unbelievable. I mean,
well,
I have not heard that's a first for me, Dave. I have not heard of that. But was it ultimately the competition that
you know
you
what
were
it was
outperforming their
interesting.
system?
Nobody would say it. But I believe with any, when you're doing a new innovation, there's people that don't want you to do it, right? Because
Correct.
it's like you're going to disrupt business as usual. You'll
Correct.
likely affect, jobs or their ability to make money or whatever.
Right.
And I think that was much of it. And because in our communities, the only people that are taking in someone else's kid and helping them out are foster parents. And so they didn't
Right.
have a framework to think about, oh, might there be thousands
A
of
d-
people willing to help someone out and they're not going to be licensed foster families? And so it was
Right.
just a new idea, and they're like, no, I don't think that should be right. So
And was it the temporary nature of it that was troubling, or that it was, I mean, it's just I can't even get my head around it.
I think it was, well, the state isn't, it's not their idea. They're not managing it. Even though we vet and we show them, people get fingerprinted, people are trained, all this other stuff, we show them all that. They were just like, you know, I personally think, um, every kid we keep out of foster care saves us as taxpayers probably over $40,000. One kid will save
That's
us
that's it adds
$40,000.
up. It adds up pretty quick when you
It
start
adds
looking
up
at the
very
numbers.
quickly.
Hmm.
So, so it was, but it was very upsetting because here I thought this was a new idea. And then all of a sudden you're stopped, and I didn't really know what to do next. And it's like I thought this was a great idea. It's a new idea. Nobody's doing this in the world. And then I can't do it. So that was kind of
So,
upsetting.
so talk to me about, you have your own family, you're trying to create an enormous community of helpers, which is really what we do as nonprofit founders. We're trying to spark our excitement for this idea and other people and create community and connection. And you're trying to do it on a very big scale for a very big problem that you're trying to solve. But what fuels you in those moments where you're getting served by attorney generals, you're trying to do good and launch this, you're trying to create all these connections and partnerships, you're overwhelmed with all of this? What made you keep going? Why did you keep going?
For me, Um, I mean, there were times like I'd lay on the floor in my office and cry and think, here I had this idea, and all these kids, if we don't help, are going to be harmed. And it really, for
Right,
me, was more I thought of my kids, and I'm like, well, if my wife and I weren't available, I would hope somebody would help them. I
right,
would hope. And I thought, and I would just go back to this little girl at Mount Sinai. I'm like, she's suffering now the rest of her life
right,
because of a simple problem that had a simple
right.
solution. And foster care isn't bad. It's not a bad thing. But when I started Safe Families, if your kid went into foster care, you as a mom or dad would only have a 20% chance of getting them back again. And so there
Wow.
wasn't this propensity to trust parents or to realize, oh, I get it. You're not in a good place right now. Let's help you out. It was like once they go in, everyone knew. Once they go in,
Right,
you're not going to get them, right? There's going to be, and I
right.
just thought that's wrong. And I knew that, in the end, kids want to be with their mom and dad.
Of course they
They
do.
don't want to
Right.
grow up in foster care or bounce from home to home,
No,
whatever.
no,
And
no.
so if we can keep them with their mom and dad, one, it saves us all as taxpayers a ton of money.
Right,
Second, that's what the kid wants is to be with mom
right.
and dad. And it's a good thing. It's just how do we help mom or dad become what their kids want them to be. And that was the issue. But now I have the cease and desist, and I didn't want to go to jail. So it was kind of a trying time.
I would say that was definitely a challenge. So on to happier things. 20 years later, 23 years later almost. Talk to us about your success and what your impact's been. And I always say that I have a love-hate relationship with the word impact because we write all these grants and we ask for funds and we measure our impact in numbers and statistics, and a child being with a parent is an immeasurable impact. You can't even there's no measuring stick for that impact of keeping a family together. There's no way to properly measure what love does for a family and a child.
Yeah.
There's no grant that's going to ask you the right question, in my personal opinion. But talk to me about what success you've had and what you think the impact that you've had in the last
Well,
20
I
years.
think, I mean, one is I had to figure out how to write laws. And so we wrote and passed 17 laws, which wasn't
Wow.
easy to do. Um, and had to figure out, well, how do we mobilize regular people to believe that they can do something? And
Right.
within their capacity, it's not like anything we're going to ask them to do more than they're able to do. So that was a second thing. And so as we've grown, we've seen a couple different things. I think we've hosted or placed over 100,000 kids in homes and have, probably helped another 100,000 families. Um, and I had to learn what is a movement because we didn't want to be a program and we didn't want to be a program or really an agency. We wanted to be a movement.
Right.
And
Right.
so I had to learn about, well, what is a movement? How do you become a movement? Who leads movements? How do you grow movements? And so that was really fun. And I ended up becoming elected as a national social movement leader because we're doing a movement of resurrecting and building people to care about kids and parents in our own communities. And then it just started to explode. I don't even have any any reason to it. It exploded throughout the U.S. We ended up becoming. I knew this. I didn't know much, but I knew this that we had to convince people this was a good thing. We had to convince governments that it's better to go this way than to take custody of kids. And so we did research and actually got funding to in Illinois, they randomly assigned kids that were called into the hotline to Safe Family versus business as usual. And so we were able to prove
Wow.
that we were more effective in keeping kids safe and out of care, and ultimately with their parents than anyone else out there. And so
Wow.
that was a big deal for us, is to be an evidence-based program. And then it just started growing internationally, which was shocking. We're helping kids in human trafficking situations and child labor and things I haven't even thought of. The solution is really the same thing is how does the community take care of these kids, support their
Right.
parents in order to avoid these other situations? So
Wow. So, I mean, you have chapters now all over the country. How many chapters do you have? And
I
you've
think over
partnered
a
with so,
hundred.
I mean, and you have partnered with a lot of churches,
Yes.
which when you were talking earlier about looking for where do we find people that care, you wisely thought, they
Yep.
might go to church. They might have aligned values with me. That might be a good resource. I mean, it it's so brilliant and so needed, and um we hear these numbers, and now with trafficking, the numbers that we're hearing, things we never even, words we weren't even in our vocabulary that we didn't even know about,
Yeah.
right?
Isn't it sad
We
that it's so
It's
sad?
tragic. It's absolutely
Yeah.
tragic.
Yeah.
And so being able to be a safe place for that is incredible. So talk to me about the dream, because you start off thinking about this little girl at Mount Sinai, and if you could just help one little girl, and then you end up taking care of a woman's children, you and your wife, and now you've helped hundreds of thousands of children across the United States. So the dream keeps growing, like any good entrepreneur. The target keeps moving. So talk to me what the big dream is. What's the dream?
Well, I think we can not eliminate foster care, but we can substantially reduce it. And that's my heart is substantially reducing foster care. You're really cutting it in half. I think we have the capacity to do. But then as we learn about these other areas, the problem of homelessness, not that we could solve everything, certainly not, but the idea that if people had a network of people around, I mean, that's how you survive, right?
A
It's
hundred percent.
yeah, I have family, my sister will help me out, my neighbors would help. It's almost like how do we create this network, this support system for any family for any reason? And I don't think people should have to prove that they're worthy of that. I
No,
think it's, if you're human, if you're an American, and it's not anything, what's interesting, it has nothing to do with government or government benefits, right? It's if
no.
you're a human and that we as humans in the United States have a basic responsibility to be the safety net, to be this loving neighbor for
Right.
you, particularly at times of need. And that's my dream. I think we could reduce foster care in half. I think we can build throughout all of the United States, mobilize communities. And it's really not it's what's funny, it's not about me anymore doing the recruitment. It's not on my shoulder. The
You
movement,
wouldn't be a nonprofit founder if you didn't say
yeah,
those words,
right,
by the way.
right.
You're
The
on script, Dave. You're right on script because that's exactly
the
correct.
the idea of it's not me about necessarily recruiting the volunteers. It's about as I recruit a volunteer, they have a network of people. And they,
Right?
it came to me when I met this one mom who took in this kid, and she said, "Oh, I went to the kid's school and I picked him up." And then the administrators at the school, they pulled me aside and said, "Who are you? Why are you taking in this kid?" And got to tell them about safe families, and they were just all intrigued. He said, "We never heard about this before." And then they said to her, could we be a safe family? And so she
Right?
had these brochures and she was like, yes, you could be a safe family. This is what we really
Oh,
need. And so it's getting people who are doing it to believe in it
right.
and to realize I'm not necessarily part of a big national movement. I'm just helping these kids in my neighborhood. And
But
and
right.
they're really the people that are helping are really the change agents, not me, not whatever. They're the ones that are making the difference. So
Well, at the core and everything you're saying, I could not agree more. I've interviewed so many homeless nonprofits, I can't even tell you, and only one that I think is making a difference, and it's called Miracle Messages. And what you said reminds me so much because what they do is they build community around a homeless person.
mm,
You sponsor someone and you call them once a week on the phone, and then after you sponsor them for a few months and they make their phone calls every week, you say, okay, well, gosh, you're in San Francisco, my sister lives in San Francisco and she's going to bring you cookies. And then the
mm,
sister says, oh gosh, now that I brought you cookies, you're so great, my friend down the street needs some help with his yard, could you help with the yard? And then the friend
yes,
the yard says, can you? And before you know it, this community is built around this unhoused person who now has all these people, the sister, the sponsor, and so on. And it's the exact same thing that you're doing with Safe Families. And it's just at the core of everything we do as humans. We grew up in villages, we grew up in families, we took care of
yeah,
our neighbors, and we built and created a community around people who needed something. And it just is that simple.
yes,
It
yeah,
it's just that simple to care about your community and reach out to be part of a community. And
yeah,
how enriched your life becomes when you are in community. And there's no greater high joy than knowing that you're a tiny cog in the wheel of somebody else's life. It's
yes.
the
And
greatest
and
feeling in
that
the world.
that these people don't need professionals necessarily. They need what you have to offer. No matter what
Right,
you have what they need. Um, and for me, it's how do you make it a way of life, right? And so
right,
my wife and I don't know, we've helped 100 kids or something like that, and we still do it. And it's how do you make, I call it hospitality, which means love of strangers, and it involves welcoming people into your
um,
home. The value of I wrote a book, Unleashing Radical Hospitality. This
I
idea
love
that
that.
we can unleash these values of caring
Right,
for and loving our neighbor and intentional compassion and things like that. And that's what I think is, when I look at what I'm doing, I'm just bubbling up these principles that we all have. We all benefited from it when we were kids.
right,
There are times when our parents probably they didn't have everything we needed as a child, and so someone else helped them in that role. And it's just
right,
resurrecting these ideas
right.
and concepts and values and stuff.
These core values. So what life lessons have you learned since you started this journey 20 years ago?
Well, one is with a new idea, and this I didn't even know, so being a social entrepreneur back then, but the field has really grown. With a new idea comes failures, and to really be good at something new, you have to be good at getting over your failures. Because I had failed, one with the laws, I kind of thought of giving up, but even I had two other ideas, not similar to this, but to solve the same problem, and both of them failed. And, I was just driven by this idea that, the cause, the need is too great to not figure it
Right.
out,
Right.
and I'm still figuring it out, right? It's like I live in Chicago. How do you mobilize if it's 2 million people in Chicago? How do you mobilize 500,000 people? No one has ever done that except, for social movements like the 1% or the Arab Springs or things like that, people mobilize it. But how do you mobilize 500,000 people to do good?
Right.
You know, and that's
I
that's a
mean,
big challenge,
that's
right?
that's my book, Dave. My book's called Change for Good. So,
Oh,
so you and I are on the same page. Is really, I mean, for me, my message and the reason I've been having these conversations is how do you inspire people to serve?
yeah.
And once you give them that, my husband says I'm kind of addicted to it, and he wishes I was a shopaholic. It would have been a lot easier. But but I think that when you have that joy, and when your cup is so full, when you help someone, it changes your life forever. And you
Yeah,
want other people to have what you're having because you know how rich life is when you help people.
yeah, yeah,
And I agree with you. How do we, because whatever movement you're starting, I want to be a part of it. I want to, I mean, I think we're trying to do the same thing.
yeah,
And we help. It doesn't take that much to make a huge difference. I mean, and when you think of the ripple effect of what the work that you're doing, you help a child, you stabilize a family, the long-term effect on that family, on that child, on government services, on finances, on everything is it's unbelievable. And you
yeah.
multiply it time the numbers. It's it's what we need to do. It's what we
You
need
know,
to
it's
do.
so it's so true, and I love your conviction and your thinking. It's just so inspiring. One guy said, the guy who started this concept of social entrepreneur, yeah, he started a group called Ashoka, and he said to me, he said, Dave, what you're doing is incredible. He said, what's incredible is your impact on the next generation. And
Right.
but was interesting, I didn't even think about it. He said all these people that are taking in kids have kids, and all of them want to, oh, I want to show, in raising my kids, oh, I want them to show, I want to show them how to be a good person and to help people. And he said, what better way to teach kids the importance of giving and sharing than to do it in your home
And to
and
model
show
it.
it together, because then it becomes, for the next generation, it becomes a way of life for them. It's not
Well,
something you do for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It's who you are, and it then becomes a way of life. And that's how you begin to get traction and make a difference. And that was
well,
inspiring to hear that.
and I would say, going back to your bricklayer father, that that's exactly what you have done. He literally showed you how you have to help
Yeah.
somebody else up, and look at what you've done. And you have lived that. You're a living example of that legacy, a
Well, you're
hundred
so kind.
percent. So, talk to me how do you think you've changed in all of this?
How I have changed?
Yeah, do you think you've changed since you started this
Um,
work?
what's interesting, I grew up having a very low self-esteem and not a strong person. I'd always, give up when something bad happened, be like, okay, I'm not going to push that issue. I'm going to keep. So I become more confident and, more good, much more comfortable with failure. And I've learned this phrase from my dad. He would say, it's good enough, right? And I realized that in order to
I
do
love that.
this, you can't have things perfect. You got
Right,
to try a bunch of things, and you have to learn when something is good enough. And
right.
so that was something those are important things that were significant to me. The joy of doing something for somebody, not just giving them something. We call it transactions versus relationships. Everybody does transactions. I'm going to give this kid a pencil or a backpack or whatever. The key
Right.
thing that they need is relational connections. But we're addicted to
Amen.
transactions, you know. People
Right.
want to do transactions. And not that it's bad, but that's really not what they need. And so I learned that personally, and I think changed by that the rest of my life. Yeah.
I could not agree more. It is 100%. It is literally building that relationship with someone, helping them build community around them, building connection. These are the things that sustain us. It isn't the pencils
Right.
and the backpacks. They're lovely, and there's nothing wrong with them. But having a relationship with someone is something that is true human sustenance that we
Yeah.
need to survive, right? We need
Yeah.
one another to survive. And I think that your story at Safe Families and what you're doing to help these children survive and thrive and their families thrive is just beautiful. I love everything that you're doing. And I want to sign when you're in movement. I want to be part of it. I'm doing my little part over here in LA,
And I think
but
that's the
I
powerful point is I'm doing this, but I think what you figured out is how do you do this 100 times, right? And
right,
how do you inspire people who have great ideas and they really just need, some confidence and some direction, and they can do something new and different to change our world. We just need innovators. We need entrepreneurs who are willing to take a look at problems out there and are willing to question and say, I don't think it should be that way. I think there's a different way. And when I learned about social entrepreneur, they said, well, we're trying to stop or fix systems that have been broken for years. And to
right,
fix a system, people just keep doing the same things because they don't know what else to do. You need external
right.
voices to show them that there is a different way. And I think, kind of all the things, your principles and all the things you're talking about gives people the confidence that they might have an idea out there that they really need to give it a try. And if it fails the first time, great. Fail, learn from it and do it again. And eventually, we have the ability to change our world.
100%, 100%. When I do the introduction and when you hear this episode, you'll hear me talk about that we interview innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern day heroes. And that is exactly what you are, Dave. You are exactly that. And the world needs more of them. And my hope in having these conversations that inspires people out there listening to really think about how they can be a part of that and where and maybe something sparks an interest in them and there's a connection with something, a story that we're sharing, and that they want to spread the joy and be involved and serve and change a life. So tell me
What
where
a
we can
great,
support.
what a great purpose you have. That's wonderful.
Well, it is my mission is to help the helpers,
Yeah.
because as you said, and every nonprofit founder says, it's not about me. And it isn't. It becomes bigger. But it is. And your story helps us magnify the power of one person. And never, ever once has a nonprofit founder said to me, oh, well, I did this and I did that. Never, never,
Interesting.
never,
Yeah.
ever, never, and never will they. And that's the beauty of these conversations, because
Yeah.
you show us the best of humanity and you show us the incredible potential we have to change the world in the smallest act of kindness by you just taking in one family. Look at what has happened. It is just magnificent. And all of us should be that lucky to have lived such a life with such service and joy and purpose. So tell us how we
Well, you're
can
so
support you,
kind.
how I mean it. I mean it sincerely and truly. But how can we support you? How can we donate? How can we volunteer? How can we get involved? Um, Tell
Well,
us.
it's so our website is safe-families.org. And there's opportunities to whatever, join, it might be in your neighborhood or in your chapter or whatever. Certainly I don't, money's great, so that's wonderful. Or even like, hey, I notice it's not here. Can I start it here? And that's how most of our chapters have started, with people that are entrepreneurial saying, that's kind of a great idea. I'd like to do it here. And that's how we've grown. Mostly internationally, we've grown a lot that way. Just people hearing about it and they're like, hey, that would work in East Africa or wherever the heck, and so those are kind of would be interesting to, if people, and that's really in some ways, I'm sure my idea came from an idea not far from it, but I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna put a little twist on it. And I think that's how innovation and ideas have happened.
Well, they happen. They all need a spark, and you're the spark that lit the fire for sure. And like I said, may we all be as blessed to light a fire that does so much good in the world. Dave, what a gift you are, and your story and your work is so beautiful. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing it with us today.
Well, thanks so much, Heidi, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed our conversation with Dave Anderson and hearing how his work is truly changing lives. His insight on unleashing radical hospitality is something I'm going to be thinking about long after this conversation. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest or other modern day heroes, please visit us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. And if this episode inspired you, please share it with someone you care about. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. This is how our stories reach and change more hearts. But more than anything, thank you for caring, thank you for believing in goodness, and thank you for being a part of the Charity Matters community. You are exactly what the world needs more of. Remember, together, we can make a difference. One small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters. See you next time.